Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tea with Crema. My name is Chris. I'll be your host, and I'm joined by my best friend, Emma.
Hello, everyone.
We are excited to bring you a part 2 already. The traveling episode was so popular with ourselves. Backed by popular demand of us, we are continuing our travel series. It's Crema Travels Part 2.
I know you did not just gas us up to then insult us to then. I am deceased. That was rude. I think it is a very popular one. This one did get some traction, I will say that.
Well, the topic is also just a lot of fun. So it is our travel episode part 2. The first time was just really reflecting on the experiences that we've had because, again, we've had some big travels recently and in the past few years and just haven't really talked about them in general. I think even a little bit amongst ourselves, but for the most part, outside of looking at social media pictures, haven't really had discussions. And so today, we're continuing our travel talks. Before we begin, we do have our tea check. So Emma, what tea did you bring today?
Today, I brought a green tea. I need a little bit of caffeine. I'm about to be out and about all weekend, so, need a little bit of a pick-me-up. Normally, I don't drink coffee, so green tea is a good alternative for me because it doesn't make me feel as anxious, heart palpitation-y.
I was like, also, like, if green tea makes you feel good and coffee makes you feel jittery, yeah, you do not have very much of a caffeine tolerance, so that works.
At all.
Actually.
I mean, Coca-Cola is enough for me sometimes, so that's there.
I forget Coca-Cola has caffeine until I drink one at like 3, and I'm like, why can't I go to sleep?
Literally.
And this is like Coke Zero, so it's not a sugar thing. It's just
Right.
the caffeine from the Coke. It's kind of weird.
Coming back to our turning 30 episode, that's also what I've noticed. My tolerance for a lot of things has gone down. I am turning into my mother. I cannot drink caffeine after 2 p.m. or else I will not be able to sleep that night. It's awful. Why did no one tell me that getting old is not great?
There's some experiences. There's pros and cons for sure. Today, I definitely did not necessarily go with a unique one, but I did go with one that is well-timed and well-needed. So It is from Celestial Seasonings, which does have the tea with crema seal of approval, even with the whole microplastics thing. It is what it is. I can look past it for Celestial
I love the little
Seasonings.
bear.
I just do. So today's tea is Tension Tamer by Celestial Seasonings. And I get this tea because the ingredients really are stress relieving, and it starts with the time that you open the box and you get to take in all of the fragrances and continues on into like the whole journey of drinking it. And so Tension Tamer really is for me like a very calming tea. It's also caffeine free, so that's very helpful too. I think pretty much almost all Celestial Seasonings offerings are caffeine free. They do have a few high energy ones, but that's neither here nor there. I'm not a Celestial Seasonings sales rep. But the ingredients in this one are Eleuthero, which I had to learn is like a stress-relieving herbal remedy. So not technically scientifically backed, but, herbal. So live your best life with it. And then it does have peppermint, cinnamon, ginger, chamomile, lemongrass, and licorice with a bunch of other like preservative type flavor. Oh, these are just like science words for vitamin B6 and B12. Never mind. So just big science words, not preservatives. My bad, y'all. I can't read. So I would say overall, one of my favorite Celestial Seasonings teas because it truly is just like that bit of relief, a little stress relief from start to finish. So definitely one of my go-tos. I know it's not one of the unique ones that I get from all sorts of different places, but I think it's important to have the practical ones on every now and then too.
I like it. I like it a lot.
So jumping into traveling part 2, we're so excited to continue on with this conversation. Thank you all 2 of us that requested part 2. It's really great. But I've realized Emma has talked about traveling does not just happen. In some cases it is a years-long journey, other times it's months long, but no matter what, even if someone were to book me a trip tomorrow, there are certain things that I would have to make sure that I'm prepped, set, ready to go, to make sure that it was actually worth the experience of going. And so it's really diving into, first of all, ain't no one flying us out right now. It's not happening in our lives.
Someone get me out there. Manifesting
Someone do it. But in
out.
the meantime, we have to do a lot of the background work. And so we're just going over what that background work looks like, because I think an important generational difference is that, we don't go to travel agents. I've not gone to a travel agent ever as an adult. And I think the last time like our family went to a travel agent, it was when I was a teenager, like early teenager, not even like 18. We're talking like 13, 14 at the latest. So yeah, I've not gone to a travel agent in a very long time. And so much travel arrangements, so many of those are made by yourself. Like you have to figure those things out. And so it's really just a matter of figuring out what are some things that we've done historically that have worked, not worked. What are our recommendations? And then also because again, crowdsourcing information is such a powerful tool. If y'all have anything that we should be looking up in the future, please let us know because your boy is not traveling. I just got to find the ways to make it more affordable. So if you have the hints and tips and tricks, please let us know because, tricks only work if you share them with your friends.
All the hacks. Put that on a bag. Put it on a tote. I like that. So first things first, what is often like, I guess first, how do you decide where you're going? Even though like, I feel like domestically you've like decided and I'm like, why would you choose Fort Lauderdale?
Okay, so first of all, I chose Fort Lauderdale because Miami is for 21-year-olds who have endless energy. Like the social 21-year-olds. I didn't enjoy Miami as a 22-year-old. It wasn't for me. Miami is that girl. You have to bring it when you're going to Miami. And I can't. It's not for me. So Fort Lauderdale was so much more my speed.
I see. I know they always talk about too, like Miami, right? Like being a Miami 10 is like being a LA 30. Like I feel like that's the energy that she brings. So, okay, sorry, keep going. So you chose Fort Lauderdale, but how do you choose destinations then?
Honestly, most of the destinations that I've chose at this point are because I know people there. So I did not travel very much growing up. I don't have a lot of experiences in a lot of different places in the United States. And so a lot of times I'm relying on the A, generosity, and B, expertise of people who are in those areas. And so some frequently traveled spots of mine are Chicago, LA, and Atlanta because I have really good friends and connections in all of those places. And by friends and connections, I mean like LA is actually mostly your friends and connections that I've just like gone along with. Enjoyed it. I'm very appreciative to all of the individuals that helped me have a great time in LA. Shout out Nick, Suko, and now. So it's a lot about connections at this point. And then the first international trip was just like a pet project of mine, something that I was really passionate about. And so for me, I think a lot of it moving forward is about things that I want to do or see. So for example, I'm on a pizza mission right now. I'm trying to try famous pizzas. So I need to go to Brooklyn to try Brooklyn style pizza in New York and just New York style pizza in general. But then also, I went to Chicago to try pizza. I know people in Chicago, but like went to Chicago to try Chicago style deep dish. I need to go to Detroit to try Detroit style pizza. So I'm on a pizza journey right now. But then also your boy's a fan of nature and also the beach. So typically if those factors go in, then I can make it work. I want to go whitewater rafting. So a lot of it has to do with like activities that I want to do. I'm also really comfortable sitting at home, but like I don't need to pay to go on a flight. Just sit in a hotel somewhere else. So if I'm going to a place, it's to do things. And so there do need to be things to do at that place.
I wish mine was like as eloquent as that. Mine is mostly based on like cheap travel. Like I look up, okay, where's the cheapest flight to get to this place? Or like not even cheapest flight. Where is it cheap to fly to from here? Like that's how we ended up in Paris that one time. That's how we ended up in Iceland. That's how we ended up in Costa Rica. So Costa Rica was looking at my friends in California and where we are in Texas and like, okay, what's a cheap area that's near to both of us? That's how we landed on Costa Rica. And then I also look at like, okay, what's the strength of the dollar compared to that place? So like now it's strength of yen to that place. So for example, typically like the euro and the pound is pretty 1-to-1. So like that's fine. Australian dollar to US though, like that was like one of the first places that I've been to that the USD is pretty strong. So it wasn't necessarily like super expensive once we got in. And then similarly to Costa Rica was like more or less very affordable. So I'm very much like a budget traveler. Like I'm going to look for the places that, because it doesn't make sense to me to like pay $200 to a flight to go to I don't even know a country that has a good currency right now. It doesn't make sense. I guess like it wouldn't make sense for me to pay right now, currently where I live, to pay $200 to go back to the US when the US to yen ratio is 150 yen is $1. Like that to me is like not a smart move. But I will pay more in flight if I know that when I get there, it'll balance out. So that's typically how I look. I will look first at like what's the cheapest area, and then I'll start looking at accommodation. So that's something that and then I think this kind of like goes into our next question of like, what are some things that you feel like are overlooked when you're planning?
In terms of like, what are things that I overlook, or what are things that people commonly overlook?
Maybe both. What have you overlooked in the past that you're like, ooh, I should have probably done a little bit more research on that?
I think transportation's always a big one.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
And I think in part of it is because transportation can be so complicated. I think figuring out a system in theory is so much different from figuring it out in practice. So a place can say that the bus transportation is good and that the buses run every 15 minutes and this, that, and the other thing. But then really understanding that, how close or how far are the bus stops and how convenient are they to the place that you're trying to go? Are there other transit systems other than buses? Do you have to figure out a mix of transportation modes? Or do they all talk to each other? The frequency of things, what are the passes like? How affordable is it to actually go versus using other methods? And so I think one of the things that I always overlook is transportation and getting around costs. I'm really good at figuring out approximations for food. I'm really good at activities. I'm really good at accommodations, but travel gets me almost every time.
Yeah, I would agree. Like that's like, so yeah, definitely for myself too. I will know the places that I want to eat. I will know the pop-in neighborhoods, all those things. But for some reason, the transportation is always the hardest one for me to gauge. I think that's the biggest thing because in the US, right, 10 miles is not very far. It doesn't seem very far, but traveling 10 miles by train, that's an hour. Like that's easily an hour. Like I think the one that sticks out to me the most is when we had gone to London. So at the time my stepmom worked at Hilton. So I had, lots of points, discounts, all of these things. And it was like, 10 miles away from London city center. So I was like, that's like super close. So I was like, yeah, book, great, all of these things. Obviously the reviews are going to be raving and they're going to be like, it's only, blah, 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 wait, minutes away from London and, da, 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 all of these things. The walk to the train station was 30 minutes. Like we had to taxi to the train station every single day. And then we were like, okay, how about we try the bus? So we got onto the bus. The bus stop was in the middle of a freaking highway. Like, I remember my mom was like, where are you taking us? Like, we are walking on the road right now. I was like, I don't know. It's a bus stop. We literally got to the bus stop. It was one pole that had a sign on it that said bus stop. So I was like, you know what? This is part of the adventure. This is part of it, and London is supposed to be one of those, like, definitely high up there in public transportation. I will still say to this day, Australia has one of the best public transportation, like, what is it?
Public transit systems.
Yeah, they have one of the best transit systems. Nothing beats Japan, but I would say Australia is a close second. But London's one, if you're not in the city proper, trash. And it happens.
Just go ahead and we can just go ahead and say pretty much any U.S. city public transit is wildly
finicky.
Inefficient.
Yeah.
Finicky. That's such a cute, sweet word. I have been to all of one other city that I'd be like, this transit wasn't awful, and that was Chicago.
Right.
Atlanta, public transit, not good. Dallas, DFW, public transit, not
non-existent.
It's absolute nonsense here. LA public transit, we did take the subway that one time, but that was about it. I don't know if public transit would have made any part of getting around in LA better. I think that place is just bad to travel in. So
without a car, right, for sure.
Even with a car, it was awful.
Yeah.
I hated going places there.
You're just stuck in traffic all the time. It's pretty awful. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, so I definitely think public transportation is something to not take for granted. And then also just like accessibility. Like Costa Rica had no public transportation whatsoever. It had buses, but we drove. And then understanding like the driving rules too. So that's something I think I also look at when I'm choosing traveling is like, do they have a public transportation system? So I look it up, but like I just don't know the efficiency of a place until you get there. I think that's
you really don't, because people will put anything on a website.
Anything. Come and visit this place. It's amazing. Lies.
Public transit, 5 out of
lies.
5 stars. They have one bus for the whole country looking place. I was like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Okay, so like what do you use to plan? Like, what are your like go-to websites? Are you just on the Google search? Like, what are you doing to plan?
Honestly, it's probably not the best thing, but I usually just go through my travel credit card. But that's just because rental cars and accommodations earn more points than anything else. And so if I go through them, I get those extra points. And again, I use the points. Definitely paid for my flight and accommodations in Brazil via points. So I'm very much a fan and a believer in the power of points, in that if I'm already going to be spending the money anyway, might as well get something out of it. And generally, I haven't found, I don't know, I'm not like a super travel bargain shopper, because I've also found that like sometimes super bargain travel shopping leads you to have to make some pretty significant itinerary compromises. Case in point, I went super budget on going to Brazil and had like the wildest layovers.
I feel like that was a trip in itself, was the getting to Brazil.
Like, I capitalized on the layover going there by taking some time to explore Sao Paulo, but like 12 plus hour layovers are nuts. And so I do think that there is a certain point where you really have to figure out, like, is the value of what you're saving really worth the potentially compromised experience? And so, like, a lot of times I found that like early morning or late night flights are less expensive, especially for domestic or on international travel. Just the pattern that I've noticed is like less expensive flights usually have wild layovers. And so it's really just a matter of what is worth it to you. Some people really take advantage of the really long layovers by, like I did in Sao Paulo, going into that place and doing a little bit of side traveling as a part of the main travel. Again, when you have 12 hours, you can pull that off pretty comfortably. But I think understanding that required a lot of extra steps for me, because I had to figure out how practical was it for me to actually be able to execute that plan, to be able to, get out of the Sao Paulo airport, to actually make it into the city. How far is like the airport from the city center where all of the walkable things were? How much was that going to be? Getting back in time, making sure that I like went to the right spot to actually get to. It was a lot of steps. I could do it again. If anyone needs help navigating the Sao Paulo airport, I can help you out. But again, I think there is a point where like you're saving money, but it's not really worth the money that you're saving. So there have definitely been some moments where I'm like, let me spend the $50 extra and not have to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Right. I mean, we've definitely made that with going to LA, right? Like it's pretty cheap to go to LA from Dallas, but spending that extra like $150 to land closer to where my sister is for like the 2 hours less of headache sometimes it's worth it, right? Like, it's like, I'm gonna just eat the cost of this because I know that I'm only going to be 10 minutes from your house versus an hour and a half away from your house. And, figuring that out too is definitely an adventure in itself. I think one of my favorite tools that I like is I really like Google Flights and I really like Kayak. So that's typically what I use when I'm looking at. Kayak has a really cool feature, which I think Google Flights has also taken on, which you can have your starting airport, and then you can type in anywhere and it'll basically tell you like within like a time frame, what's the best place to travel to for like the best bang for your buck. So that's how we got to Iceland that one time. Was just like looking that up, and it just so happened that it worked within the time frame of us being out for school. That's something that I like to use, is definitely Google Flights or Kayak. I also really like using Reddit. Reddit has had some gems on there in terms of safety, in terms of where I should actually check out, which like goes into my next question of like, how do you find those like hidden gems? Like I remember when you went to Brazil, you went on that, was it paragliding?
I did go paragliding.
Right. Like that to me is like, I would not think that that's like the top destination for you to do as like how do you find these things, right? Like, how do you know, like, oh, I'm going to go paragliding. Like, I hate heights, but I'm going to do it.
I will say that was a TripAdvisor thing. I wouldn't necessarily call that one like a hidden gem. I would say hidden gem is when I went to that amazing beach based on a conversation that I had with other people who were traveling on a tour that I went while I was in Brazil. So I did have an unscheduled day. I left the day unscheduled because I was like, I wanted to I manifested that experience of because people will come back from places and be like, wow, I met these people while I was in Brazil and it completely changed my itinerary. I had the best time of my life. And I was like, great, love that for you. So what I'm going to do is most of my trip is going to be planned and I'm going to leave a day open. So that way, if something happens in those first few days, I can use that last day to like do the unplanned thing. And that's literally what happened.
Right.
And while I was on the bus tour of Rio, I met a couple from Wisconsin, and they're the lovely couple. We became photo buddies, and so like they would take my pictures, I would take their pictures. It was a great time. But they were like, you have to go out of the city. It's just south of the city. It's this amazing beach. It's beautiful. Like, now granted, the beaches in Rio are actually really nice too. So I was like,
Right.
oh, they're better than
Right.
these beaches? Say less. I have to go. And I did. They truly were some of, like, as of this moment of my life, they were the most beautiful beaches I've ever been to in my life. Did I have, like, a moment there? Yes, but that was, like, a me thing, like, trying to follow Emma's advice and, like, taking more pictures. But, however, that was, like, in that particular moment, genuinely, it was serendipitous in the sense that I allowed myself to be open to an unplanned experience, because I would not have found that beach, or not never have found that beach, but I would not have necessarily
put yourself out there. Like,
I had to put myself out there, because the people, like the couple that I went with, they did say, they were like, it's a beautiful beach, it's an amazing beach, but like you're gonna lose cell phone reception when you're out there, and like there are gonna be some other things that you have to like figure out and plan for, and I just I understand it was not the most wise decision. If you are unsure about like what unwise decision I am talking about, please revisit the Brazil episode where I went in an unlicensed driver's car and just hoped that I made it back to my hotel. And I did, because
you did,
there's this episode. So.
I mean, also like you were in an emergency situation. So it was like you had to just...
I was going to have to do that anyway. I just happened to also be in an emergency. I wouldn't say like emergency. I wasn't like bleeding out, but like I was bleeding. So
you were bleeding.
Good times. I was having a good time.
Bleeding.
So maybe that helped. And they were like, oh, this dude, it's not worth it.
We can't kidnap him. He's damaged goods.
So I would say, like, I don't know if you ever had like a just go with the flow, see what happens kind of moment. But like, I would say that was that's my first international travel time. And that's one of the few times that I've ever just been like, let's just do it.
Let go and let God.
Literally. It's different when you're like in just a different US city. It's not really the same experience of just like, that was my first time where I was like, okay. And now I have a really good travel story. It was honestly worth the experience. I see why people do it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it every time, but like, it happens. It works out if you keep your head about you.
I think that's the thing, right? Like, you have to be open to the experience, but also like understanding safety. Like, you have to know when is safe and when is not safe. I would say that in terms of hidden gems, like Isaac and I have definitely been lucky along the way. I think people just enjoy talking to Isaac for whatever reason. Just kidding. I know why. But anytime that I've traveled with him, they're very, like, everyone just kind of wants to talk to him. And so that has been always really helpful, because people are like, oh, have you guys gone to this place? No, you guys haven't. So when Isaac and I went to our second week in Costa Rica, it was pretty much left open, because we knew we'd be exhausted, because it was action jam-packed the first week, because my girlfriends were only going to be there for 5 or 6 days. So we knew that we had to like make the most out of that time. And I was like, I'm not going to plan anything for the second week, because I know we're going to be exhausted. So one of my cousins had actually been to Costa Rica a couple months prior and was like, oh, you need to, like, if you're going to do anything, you need to do a night tour. Like, it's so cool. It's so much fun. You get to see like all of the nature that you would never expect to see. So I just looked it up and I was like, night tour. And it just so happened that there was a guy who like did guides near where we were staying. So we went and asked him, and we're like, oh, like, we're interested. We have a couple more days left. Could we do it? And he was like, yeah, sure. Do you guys want to go out in like 40 minutes? And we're like, oh, like tonight, like we're going tonight. Like, okay, yeah, cool. Let's do that. And he was like, yeah, just make sure that you're wearing, things that cover your legs. Like, we're gonna be literally going through the wilderness. Our guide was literally this man who had a machete and a camera, and he was living his best life. Isaac hates insects and was picking up all the creepy crawly things. We had a great time. And then we get not home, but we get back to like where the drop off point is, and the guy who works there, he does like all of these tours. He goes, hey, I remember you guys saying you guys have a couple of days. Do you guys want to go down to Panama? And we're like, what? And he's like, yeah, I'll just drive you guys down to Panama. It's like one of the tours I do. You know, you hop on a boat, blah, blah, blah. It's this much. And I was like, I mean, F it. What else are we going to say that we went to Panama? Because where we were was like 30 minutes from the border of Panama. He's like, you guys are US citizens, even better. Like, it's going to be so easy for you guys to get through because you're Americans. Like, this is not something that I would recommend to someone who doesn't already have this like visa stat or like passport status. And I was like, okay. So he literally, like the man who owns the travel agency, picked us up, dropped us off. Like he walked us through immigration, walked us through border patrol, all of these things. And afterward, he was like, yeah, I'll pick you guys up. Like, I'm going to set you guys up with my guy. Like, we could have easily been kidnapped at any point throughout this entire trip. Just decided to let go and let God. And we had one of the best experiences ever, just like exploring Panama. Like we got on this little boat. The kid that we were with, he was a young kid. He was maybe like early 20s. Like at one point picked up his girlfriend. Like we were just like all hanging out. I was like, what is happening right now? Like, how is this life? But, you know, ended up getting back in. When you're traveling to Panama, though, there's like a curfew. So, and it's a pretty early I think it was like 7 p.m. Because if you're not back in, then you're stuck in Panama. You have to stay there for the next day because they closed down their immigration. And so...
Oh, so it's not a curfew so much as business hours.
Exactly. So it's like, if you're not back in, like, you're not coming back to Costa Rica. So we knew we had like this, like, maybe 12 hours in Panama. And it was honestly like one of the best times that we've had. It was so like, just, yeah, sure. Why not? Let's just do it. F it.
I'm not gonna... Now I see what you were talking about when you're like, wow, Chris, you could have been kidnapped. And I'm listening to your story. I was like, oh, yeah. There's definitely some moments from like, you're U.S. citizens? Perfect. I'm like, that wasn't a red flag to you? That didn't stand out as a moment of where he was like, man, these people would be really good to kidnap, you know?
These are some high-ranking ransoms right here. Little does he know, my parents would have been like, they wanted to take
Would you like her debt?
Yeah, they wanted to go to Panama. All right, here you go. Also, she has student loan debt, so I hope y'all are planning to pay that off while you're there.
Because you know what doesn't go away at death? Student loan debt. So
literally. So anyway, that's like, I think the hidden gem. So I guess the long-winded story from both of us was like, ask the people you know, because there are people who, you know, either have seen things or wanted to see things that couldn't do. And also like locals. Like I think the locals they know what's what. Like I remember when we went to Iceland, we just stopped into this pub because I needed to use the bathroom. And then we were talking to the bartender and we're like, oh, you know, like we're visiting, we have a car, we're just driving around. Like, do you have any places that we should go? And she's like, have you guys seen this waterfall? And we're like, no. And she goes, it's 30 minutes away. Like literally no one ever goes there, but it's the most beautiful waterfall in this area. We went and it was untouched. Like people were not there. There were like picnic tables. So clearly people go there, but it was just no tourists, none of those things. Like we have some of the best pictures from Iceland at that place because of just asking the locals, right? Like, so there's power in, you know, tapping into your social battery to use it for good.
I think going out on a limb. Now again, within reason.
Yeah.
I think that's also really important.
Do not cause an international incident.
I think both of us in these moments, I would say like your Costa Rica trip and my Brazil trip was maybe it's just like a little bit past like what I would usually recommend.
Right, for sure.
Did they both work out? Yes, but I wouldn't necessarily just be out here just like...
I think there's also just like a level of, I don't even know if it's like privilege either, like that you and I both share in, we were visiting predominantly brown countries and I am brown and Spanish speaking. So that like definitely helped with, you know, certain things. I wouldn't say that all Americans would receive the same treatment that either of us received.
That's true.
So there is a level of that, you know, just like really be aware of your surroundings.
I was definitely mistaken as Brazilian by Brazilians. So
right.
I'm sure like had I maintained and then continued to develop my Portuguese, would have had an even better time.
Right.
So there is definitely that. I acknowledge, I don't know if I call it like privilege, but like it was a part of the experience. You know what I mean?
Right. Like that's why I was like, I don't know if privilege is the right word. Like, I don't think I think that there's just some benefits. It was a benefit.
I had a good time because maybe it helped kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I'm not sad about it. It definitely, like, again, it literally worked out. All of those cases. So, you know, sometimes it just let it happen.
So in terms of, planning all of those different things, do you want to leave us with a final rating, a final nugget, last thoughts?
Planning trips, usually, like, at one point when it seemed like it felt like it was affordable, honestly, 5 out of 5 stars. Now that I think the economy has recalibrated itself, it's been kind of like 1 out of 5 stars. It's been so sad. It just hasn't been as fun. I don't know what all has gone into the change. I know a lot of things have gone into the change. Like recently, travel has been 1 out of 5 stars, planning it at least, because I'm just like, okay, well, I tried, guys. Can't afford it. Maybe next year.
Literally. Yeah. So I think, yeah, definitely, especially when you have less. I feel like when you're just like young and just like, yeah, let's do it. Obviously, that was a 5 out of 5. I was living my best life. Now, I'm paying for it, and that's fine because I did have really good memories. But now I'm like a little bit more fiscally responsible. I'm like, dang, this is why our parents really weren't traveling out there like that with us. Like, it was once a year, and I don't know how they did it, but they did it. They made it do. Traveling is expensive. Somebody fund us. Fly us out. That's all I'm asking for.
We'll have a great time. Well, that means it is now time for our
Rapid fire question.
All right, Emma. What trip? I just assumed that it was going to be a trip related question. What question did you bring today?
Well, now I don't want it to be a trip question. I'll make it a quick question. What is the most unusual pizza topping you've tried and liked?
I think it just depends on like what the other people, their thoughts are. Because, I am a fan of pineapple on pizza.
What?
I also enjoy feta cheese on pizza and mushrooms and...
That's not unusual, though. I said unusual.
I don't know if I've had unusual toppings. My thing with pizza is like I'm trying to get the best classic pizza. So
I see.
I'm always just trying to explore the best of the best, not necessarily the best of the unusual, if that makes sense. So like, who has the best cheese pizza? Which I know sounds like the cheese pizza. I'm like, but no. There's an art to cheese pizza. There's a way to do it wrong, for sure. Chicago looking at you.
Literally. Sorry. No hate to Chicago deep dish, but that is trash. Anyway, because after I asked that question, I was like, I'm definitely just like a pepperoni and mushrooms gal. But I have had, which I thought was unusual, was like a mascarpone honey pizza, which was surprisingly really delicious. And it had pepperoni on it. So it was like pepperoni with like, it wasn't just honey, it was like hot honey. So I think that made a little bit of a difference, but like super creamy, almost desserty and savory at the same time. But I also like in Japan, they don't make pepperoni pizza. Like that's not a thing. So like my go-to pizza though is an arugula and prosciutto pizza. That's a solid.
I've recently discovered the beauty of arugula. There's something so arugula. Fresh and delicate about it.
Peppery. Like it's like perfect.
It's interesting. So I definitely have discovered that.
And it's good on a pasta too.
It just is. It's also just good on like it's arugula. It is. Yeah. Explore it. Check it out.
Arugula. Okay, what's your question today?
If you could travel on a mythical animal, what animal would it be?
A hippogriff. Duh.
Oh, like the buckbeak kind of thing?
Yeah.
Checks
you
out.
have to have his trust.
I feel like it would be a Pegasus or a unicorn.
Pegasus. Unicorns fly?
No, but they're just fun.
I guess you just said mode of transport. Like you could just be walking to wherever. What's the place?
I mean,
Mordor?
You roll up on a unicorn and like, come on now, you're turning some heads.
That's
so
really what
people are going to be looking at you.
For the wow factor.
The wow factor, I think a flying horse would be cool too, but like a unicorn, shoots rainbows.
It's different.
It's going to be a great time. So, well, Emma, where can people find the podcast?
You can find the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at The Tea with Crema. If you'd like to fund our travels, you can also Venmo us at The Tea with Crema. If you'd like to listen to our past episodes on travel, such as Travel Goals Part 1 or Chris's Brazil Adventure, you can find our podcast on all of your favorite streaming platforms. We hope to see you next time. Bye!